Tim from Hooniverse, and today we're working on the 1969 Jeep Wagoneer. I'll be putting on a new lift on it. Right now it has a 2.5-inch lift that's really old and is kind of sagging down, so the tires rub on the fenders if it's loaded up or if I go over some bumps off-road. So what I'll be doing is I'll be replacing that with a 4-inch lift, which should give us a little bit more clearance for the 31-inch tires that are on it right now. Should be super simple, just nothing but nuts and bolts. Hope to get it done in about half a day. All right, so these are the basic parts that make up the lift kit I'm going to be putting on. The rear springs are a little bit longer and they have these big long flat leaves to control the axle wrap from the leaf springs. These are the fronts, basic late 1800s technology of a semi-elliptic leaf spring. The U-bolts are what holds the axle to the leaf spring like this. They tend to fatigue over time, so we're going to put new ones on all 4 corners. And then 4 new shocks should help smooth out the ride and keep things nice and controlled.
So the first thing you got to do on the lift is get it jacked up as high in the air as you can and get the biggest jack stands you've got under the frame. After you got it jacked up, the next thing you got to do is take all the wheels off so you can get at all the suspension pieces you need to get to. With all that out of the way, you can get going on the shocks or the leaves. Usually the order doesn't matter. You can start on the leaves, you can start either at the axle or at the shackle ends, but you have to keep an eye on what the axle is going to do as you unbolt it, because you don't want to just drop it straight onto the pavement. So you have to support it with a jack and some jack stands as it comes unhooked from the leaves. As you get the leaves unhooked, you have to do the same thing to hold them up because they're pretty heavy. And they tend to be kind of stuck in their spot, so you have to knock them out with a good kick or a hammer. Once you have all of the parts out of the way, the old shocks and the old springs off, then you can get started to put the new ones in. The order doesn't really matter, again, whether you do the shock or the spring first, but sometimes you want to keep an eye on how much space there is, which one's easier to move around. With the Wagoneer, the front springs and shocks went in pretty easy. In the back, the rear leaf spring was a big pain to get in and out just because it's longer and has a bigger arch on it, and it didn't want to fit inside the fender as we had to line it up with the shackle on either end. The leaf spring is made up of a stack of flat pieces of metal that they curl into a U shape. You can see between these two the difference in ride height that the new one will give me, because the U curves up a little bit higher. You can still get a higher curve and a taller spring, but still have the same spring rate without it getting any stiffer, as long as those pieces of metal are the same thickness between the two. As you reinstall the shocks and the springs, on each of these bolt holes, you want to grease that stuff up really well, because all these parts are going to be sliding on each other for another 10 to 20 years. And so the grease helps them ride a little bit smoother, prevents corrosion, prevents wear. With everything in place, then you want to torque everything down properly. After I finish all of these, I'm going to come back in a couple of days after driving the truck around a little bit, and I'm going to re-torque all of these bolts to make sure that they're as tight as they're supposed to be. So no job ever goes perfectly straightforwardly. In this case, we had a little bit of a hang-up because the new U-bolts were 1/2-inch bolts where the old ones were 7/16. It's not a big deal aside from the fact that the plates that they go through had holes that were sized for 7/16 bolts. So after a little bit of wiggling around, we just decided to drill out the holes on the old plates to fit the new bolts, and everything went back together nice and smooth.
When it's all done, we get to take it for a drive. What is rubbing on what? Hey Henry, do you know what we're doing today? Okay, so today I'm gonna put a new lift on the Wagoneer. Do you know what that's gonna be? No? Okay. So what we have to do is we have to lift up the car, and then we have to take the wheels off.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
Why is that your favorite part?
Because Guido is the fastest.
Oh, yeah, does he take the wheels off at a pit stop? Okay.
He goes, piss, piss, piss. And
What tool do we use to do that?
I forget.
Oh, is it the impact wrench?
Yeah, an impact.
What noise does it make?
Pursue, pursue.
Okay. So then once we take the wheels off, then do you know what parts we have to take off? Do you know what these things are down here? What are those?
So,
Oh, well, this part's the shock, and then these parts are the springs. So when we put the lift on, we're gonna take the old springs off, and we're gonna put the new springs on.
oh,
And then we're also gonna take the old shocks off, and we're gonna put the new shocks on.
okay.
Okay? So, does that sound like fun? Yeah. What do we, do you have any questions?
I have a lot.
Oh, okay.
How do we even take off the old spring?
Oh, how do we take off the old springs? So there's bolts that hold the springs to the axle. And they're these things right here, and they go around the axle, and they're called U-bolts. Why do you think that we call them U-bolts?
Because they look like a U.
Because they look like a U. Very good. And so we're going to take off all the U-bolts and put on new U-bolts. And there's big, big nuts and bolts that hold the leaf springs to the axle. And then there's big nuts and bolts that hold the end of the leaf spring to the car. And we have to take those off too.
Okay.
What tool do you think we're going to use for that?
Impact wrench.
Yeah, we'll probably use the impact wrench for that. You're right.
Impact full of nuts and
Yeah.
bolts.
Okay. Does that sound hard or easy?
Easy.
Yeah, it should be easy, huh? Okay, we'll see if it's really easy though. We'll see how long it takes. Okay.